This safety training module has been designed to educate laboratory supervisors and their staff at Lower Columbia College on the use of personal protective equipment, commonly referred to as PPE. According to Washington State Administrative Code, LCC is responsible for ensuring you have appropriate PPE, are trained on how to use your PPE, and know how to care for your PPE. So what does PPE look like? PPE is defined as an item or items used to protect the eyes, face, head, body, arms, hands, legs, and feet. In a laboratory setting, PPE can include, but is not necessarily limited to, items such as splash goggles, chemically resistant gloves, laboratory coats, face shields, chemical aprons, and chemically resistant shoes. In order to determine which types of PPE are required in your laboratory, you must first identify the hazards present. Hazards may include potential chemical exposure, potential infectious material exposure, inhalation hazards, physical and mechanical hazards. Be sure you have written standard operating procedures as a part of your chemical hygiene plan that describe what PPE is to be worn when using laboratory chemicals, instruments, and equipment. Before you use PPE, be sure to first consider other ways to get hazardous jobs done. Reduce hazardous materials or processes, and apply engineering controls to reduce or eliminate hazards. The goal of these steps is to eliminate the need for PPE wherever possible. A common example of a laboratory engineering control is a chemical fume hood, which eliminates the need for a respirator by effectively reducing an employee's exposure to airborne materials. Washington Administrative Code requires the use of eye protection for exposure to any of the following hazards: flying particles, molten metal, liquid chemicals, acids or caustic liquids, chemical gases or vapors, any light that could injure the eyes, and objects that can puncture. Washington Administrative Code also requires LCC to make sure employees exposed to hazards that could injure their hands use appropriate hand protection. Examples of these hazards include absorbing harmful substances, severe cuts, lacerations, or abrasions, punctures, chemical burns and/or thermal burns, and harmful temperature extremes. If you or your employees are exposed to any of these hazards, hand protection must be worn. Make sure when choosing hand protection, you consider how well the hand protection performs relative to the tasks, conditions present, duration of use, and hazards and potential hazards present. Make sure when choosing hand protection, you consider how well the hand protection performs relative to the job tasks you will be performing. For example, an employee cleaning broken glassware that is contaminated with chemicals should be wearing a glove that is both chemical resistant and puncture resistant. There are situations where the appropriate protection may only be accomplished with the use of double gloving. Be sure to consider the conditions present. For example, are you working with a chemical that is under pressure or vacuum, or being heated or cooled? These conditions could change the required PPE. Consider how long you plan to wear the PPE. A longer duration may require a thicker glove, or a changing of gloves due to the permeation rate of the chemical through the selected glove. And finally, consider all of the hazards and potential hazards that are present. When dressing for the lab, remember that LCC requires long pants, long sleeves, and closed-toed shoes to be worn when hazardous chemicals are used. LCC also recommends the use of a laboratory coat or jacket when using hazardous chemicals, including fire-rated jackets when using flammable chemicals or open flame. Knowing what type of hazardous materials you are working with and in what manner you are using them will be the key to successful selection of your PPE. Always read and be sure to understand the information on your materials safety data sheet before using the material. Make sure to thoroughly review the PPE Section 8 of the safety data sheet and comply with any PPE requirements. Additional PPE may be required. Do not rely purely on the manufacturer's recommendations. In this example, the chemical manufacturer recommends the use of splash goggles, possibly a face shield, butyl or neoprene gloves, and a butyl rubber apron. If you are ever unsure about specific PPE selection, be sure to contact your environmental health and safety manager for more guidance. Do not proceed with your job task if you do not know what PPE is required to perform the task. Laboratory supervisors must document that they have completed a hazard assessment of their work area using LCC's Hazard Assessment Tool. Laboratory supervisors must also complete a hazard assessment for any employees that work in their laboratory, also using LCC's Hazard Assessment Tool. All hazard assessments must also be certified by a laboratory supervisor's signature. All hazard assessment forms will be reviewed and maintained by LCC's Environmental Health and Safety Manager. When you use your hazard assessment tool, be sure to select the PPE that is correct for the hazard that is present. For example, you may not be able to wear regular nitrile disposable gloves with certain chemicals you are using, and will need to select an alternative. Be sure that any PPE you obtain for your employees or yourself fits correctly. Baggy PPE can create a hazard by itself. PPE should be durable, fit snugly, and not interfere with the employee's movements. And finally, talk with your employees or employer and make sure all known allergies to PPE materials are documented and avoided. The appropriate sequence for donning PPE is to first put on your lab coat. Second, don your goggles and/or face shield. And lastly, don your gloves. The correct sequence for PPE doffing is to first remove your gloves, secondly, remove your face shield or goggles, and lastly, remove your lab coat. The following video is an example of how to correctly don and doff a lab coat.
The proper way to don or put on a lab coat is to remove it from its location. First, insert one arm into the sleeve. Next, insert the other arm into the other sleeve. Adjust the shoulders and the sleeves until they are comfortable. Then close the front of the coat. To doff or remove a lab coat, release the front closures and open the front. Slide the fingers of one hand under the cuff of the opposite sleeve, pulling the arm from the sleeve. Remove the arm completely from the sleeve. Slide the fingers of the freed hand under the cuff of the remaining sleeve and pull the arm from the sleeve. Hang the coat in its proper location for reuse. If the coat is soiled, after removal, turn the coat inside out and place it in a soiled linen hamper for proper cleaning.
This video gives an example of how to correctly don and doff disposable gloves.
Before using a disposable glove, always ensure the right type is chosen for the type of work and potential hazards. Make sure the right size of glove is used. Measure your hand using a glove sizing chart. Wearing the right size will reduce the potential for tearing and also ensure freedom of movement for the hand. Remove any jewellery that may rip the gloves and wash your hands before donning gloves, as well as after each glove change. To don, first select a glove from the dispenser and check for any visible tears and other defects. Gently open the glove at the cuff and insert the hand into the glove. Once the hand is inserted, move the fingers down into the glove's fingers to properly align it and ensure you have a snug fit all over. Roll the cuff of the glove down the wrist until the glove is secure. And now apply the same technique for the second glove. When removing, first, grasp the outer edge near the wrist area. Fold it over and peel it away from the hand, turning it inside out as it goes. This will trap potential contaminants inside the used glove. Once the glove is off, hold it with the gloved hand. To remove the other glove, place the bare fingers inside the cuff without touching the glove's exterior. Now peel it off from the inside, turning it inside out as it goes and using it to envelop the other glove. Finally, discard them appropriately and never wash or reuse disposable gloves.
When donning laboratory goggles, first position the goggles over your eyes and secure them to your head using the earpieces or headband. When donning a face shield, position the shield over your face and secure on the brow with the headband. Adjust eyewear so that it fits comfortably, yet still provides protection from the hazards present. It is very important that you not only use your PPE effectively, but that you care for your PPE correctly. When using PPE, always be sure to inspect it for any damage or previous contamination before use. Do not use damaged PPE. Find a replacement. If you are reusing PPE, such as reusable gloves, make sure they are clean before storing them. When you have removed contaminated PPE, make sure you dispose of it according to state regulations. It may need to be packaged and disposed of as a hazardous waste. Check with your environmental health and safety manager for more information. And finally, remember, use PPE when hazards or potential hazards are present. Use the correct PPE for the hazard. Never use PPE you have not been